All right, y'all, welcome in. A little special edition right here of Through the Whistle as a part of CHSN. That's Jake Butt, Michigan Wolverine. I'm Joshua Perry, Ohio State Buckeye. We talk all things Big Ten. Neither one of our teams are playing this weekend, but there is a championship that will be given out. Either Oregon or Penn State will hoist the trophy in Indianapolis at Lucas Oil Stadium. Jake, before we get into this, how you feeling, man?
I feel great. I'm excited. I'll be there this weekend, traveling to Indy tonight. So excited to watch this game. Excited to see another Big Ten championship. Are you traveling, JP?
I would have made the trip to Indianapolis had Ohio State upheld their end of the bargain last week, but I'm not going to waste my money going out there. I got to be in. Go ahead.
It's going to be a medley of different fans. Like my dad's going, his brother's going. Like I know a few Buckeye fans that are going. It's from a travel standpoint, Oregon to get to Indy, tough. Penn State to get to Indy, even that's a bit of a drive. From a business standpoint, Ohio State was the perfect team to get to Indy.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting thing, too, just talking about what the crowd's going to look like. I think it could be just like general football fans. The tickets are fairly cheap right now. I think there are a lot of people who are fans of either one of these teams that are like, my team is going to be in the college football playoff. I might just want to go spend my money on a playoff game rather than spending it on the conference championship. So certainly interesting there. I got to do a playoff reaction show in Connecticut. So logistics were going to be kind of crazy. Last thing I'll say. People are petty, so I know a number of people who booked hotel rooms in Indianapolis in case Ohio State won, and they have not canceled their reservations yet out of sheer pettiness and misery. So the other people who want to book hotels right now can't because they won't give up their reservation yet.
That doesn't make sense to me. That's not financially sound, though, is it? I know you're a big finance guy. Is that sound?
Dude, it's off of sheer pettiness. Like that's what it is. Like they're beyond the finances at this point. They just want to get their last dig at whoever is going to be in Indianapolis over the weekend.
Must be nice, man. You got Buckeye fans, $20 million roster, just eating the cost on these hotel rooms. Must be nice.
Just spending money all over the place, putting good after bad. All right. Let's get into the X's and O's of this bad boy here. So Oregon, as of right now, is a 3.5-point favorite. I thought the line was going to be bigger, Jake, when it was released. But as you start to look back at it, like Penn State certainly they don't have a marquee win. Their schedule was favorable. Oregon has that big win, but it was at home against Ohio State by just a point. And outside of that, they don't have a ton of marquee wins either. Like if you want to count Boise State because of what they're doing this year as a marquee win, you certainly can. But like, I guess Vegas is kind of in this, we're trying to figure out what the true ceiling of both of these teams would be. I think the public feels very similarly, but you and I think might have a different approach to this one. So just initially, when you see this matchup, what jumps out to you?
Well, I want to start with the mental side real quick because we've talked about all season James Franklin's record against top 5 teams. But then you really think about it, and like most of those losses really just came to Michigan and Ohio State. Like his top 5 record is pretty much, 80% plus losses to those two programs. And it's like a mental block. The result of Michigan-Ohio State game was a mental block. When Penn State lost to Ohio State, I look at it's a mental block to me because of the play calling on the goal-to-go situation. How is that the play call? Well, it's because you get in your own head. What I'm really interested is here. There's no history between Dan Lanning and James Franklin. There's really no deep history between these two programs. I wonder if that allows James to coach with a different type of freedom. I think Dan Lanning coaches in general almost freedom to to his own demise at times. But for James, what's cost him in some of these big games is a tightness and almost coach is unsure, it seems, in some of these big games. So I think I want to start there, Joshua. Are you into the mental side at all of this? Do you think that is going to play a factor?
Yeah, I mean, yes, but I also think that for James Franklin, like, yes, the block could be Ohio State, the block could be Michigan, but especially in the last handful of years, you're talking about teams that are college football playoff teams. Like James Franklin, I think, might have lost to like one of those games to Michigan that wasn't like the playoff caliber type Michigan squad. But like every year that he played Ohio State, you're talking about a roster that was in the conversation for a national title. And the last half decade, really since 2020, for Michigan, it's been those teams that are college football playoff teams. So like, yes, I do think part of it is like there's a block with those teams. I think you could also make a legit case that like when it comes to actually playing teams that are capable of winning a title, he just ain't the guy who's going to get you the win. And so I'm curious if that flips for Oregon. Now, I will say, and you and I talked about this before Oregon beat Ohio State, Dan Lanning, like we were kind of looking around and saying, Dan Lanning, where's your big win? Like what have you done to say that you're a guy who we should 100% trust and count on? I do think the way that he has coached this year, he's proven to be a guy that will do everything to try to win the football game. Now, that comes with a lot of risk. And James Franklin feels a little bit more risk averse, where he might coach at times to try not to lose a football game. I think that's going to be a battle within this one. If things start to get a little bit tense and it is, a tie game, a 3-point game, a touchdown game, as you start to get late into the third and into the fourth quarter, do you get over aggressive Dan Lanning? Do you get over conservative James Franklin? And how would that affect the football game?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And we talked about this before the Ohio State, Michigan. The moments in these games, obviously momentum plays a huge factor. So those fourth down decisions, those third down decisions, those special teams decisions are going to be huge. But more than anything, the trenches are going to decide this matchup. And if you ask me what I'm looking at, it's the trenches. And I start with when Oregon has the ball. Their offensive line they're going to be a Joe Moore Award finalist, top 3 offensive line in college football. Outside of those first 2 weeks, since they shuffled, they've been completely dominant. You look at the 2 tackles, they've been completely dominant. And for Penn State to win, if you just go in their layers here, I don't think Penn State has an elite secondary. I think they're a good secondary. I don't think they have an elite secondary, and I don't think they have a good enough secondary to hang with Oregon, particularly with a healthy Tez Johnson. That part's scary. So it's a race then, effectively, for Abdul Carter, Zane Durant, and Dennis Sutton. Can they get to Dillon Gabriel before he releases the ball? And here's the key stat. So PFF tracks this. Dillon Gabriel, when he's kept clean versus under pressure, when he's kept clean, he has a 92.2 grade. That's 9th best in college football. When he's under pressure, that drops to a 59, which is 38th best in college football. Then you just have blitz versus non-blitz. Okay, when he's not blitzed, his grade is a 90.7. That's 6th in college football. When teams blitz him, that grade drops to a 75.2, which is 46th best. So you see, both under pressure and blitzed, he doesn't become a bad quarterback. But when he's kept clean and when he's not blitzed, he is an elite quarterback. So the difference between can they get pressure and make him uncomfortable or not is 2 completely different quarterbacks that I think will decide the game.
Dude, I tend to agree with that. And the numbers that you put out there, I think, put great context around it. The thing that makes me so curious, though, is Penn State is a team that plays man-to-man, and they change it up, and they run some cover too. And you can ID motion them pre-snap, move the running back around, move the tight end around, see if somebody travels or not, and you can know exactly what they're in, blitz or not. And the problem for me is, let's say you bring the extra rushers. You're playing man-to-man. Somebody gets beat, somebody misses a tackle. Now what? Right? And I think that's the danger of Oregon's skill group. And I'm scarred, I guess, from when Ohio State played them, and I watched what they did there. But like, they've got some guys who can do the catch and run thing and be very dangerous. They've got some guys who can make you miss out in space and be very dangerous. And with a Penn State secondary that I'm not super high on, I'm probably lower than you are. I don't think they're great. And I also don't think they have elite speed either to keep up with the speed of Oregon. That could be an interesting thing. Like, there's this whole what happens pre-snap, what happens in the pocket, but then once the ball is out, how does the play finish? Penn State, when they played Ohio State, there was some catch and run in there, right? Like, there were some plays where Ohio State schemed them up. They got their guy open. It was a catch and run toward the end zone, and I think Oregon can replicate some similar things.
Well, another thing that we're always taught as offensive guys is when you're playing man-to-man coverage, the quarterback run is a lot.
It's open.
Okay.
Yeah, no,
So if you're bringing
available.
pressure and you're man-to-man zone, you talk about zone eyes. The zone eyes, the defense has eyes on the quarterback. So when the defense sees when the quarterback decides to run, man, like you said, especially if you're outmatched from an athletic standpoint, you have your eyes on your man, aka Dillon Gabriel, can really make you pay. That was a big deciding factor in the Ohio State game. Remember that final go ahead touchdown was off a read option on, I believe, 4th and short or 3rd and 1. So that's another piece of it. But yes, Tom Allen plays a ton of man-to-man coverage. It feels like this is a game that, maybe this is a game where he decides to implement some wrinkles and try to play the chess match. But Dillon Gabriel, arguably the best quarterback in college football, Heisman candidate. Now he has full health at receiver with Tez Johnson back and an offensive line that's playing as good as anybody. I'll say this: Penn State's defensive line, top 10 in pass rush grade. Okay, so I like they move Abdul Carter. Oregon's got 2 great tackles. Penn State's going to line Abdul Carter up over the center. They're going to line him up all over the place. And he is a guy that can wreck games. The head of the snake is the quarterback. If you can get after him with pass rush, that's Penn State's best formula to win defensively.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like certainly a game where, Jordan James, Noah Whittington, those guys are going to have to be in pass pro a little bit, chip on the edges, scan the interior of that pocket to clean up any messes that might happen there. I do think, to your point, if there's one place that Penn State would take over when they're on defense, it is that front. You mentioned Abdul Carter, Deni Dennis Sutton has been phenomenal. Zane Durant's a guy who you and I have raved about all year long. Like, they certainly have some pieces there. And especially when those guys are real locked into the game plan, that can wreck the game. Let's flip it over to the other side when Penn State has the football. And we talk so much about this offense. I'm certainly not in love with the way that it operates. A lot of it is Tyler Warren. A lot of it is smoke and mirrors, formation, personnel shifting, window dressing. They take the ball out of the quarterback's hands in some crucial situations. And you've got an Oregon defense here that I don't think nationally gets enough attention, and certainly in the Big Ten Conference isn't talked about enough. I mean, you go through the front that they have, Jordan Burch and Derek Harmon on the interior, who's one of the most disruptive players in America. You got Mateo Uiagalelei, who has just finished the season on a crazy tear. Linebackers all run well. It's a secondary that wants to get in your face, even though they're small. They're not a big secondary physically, but they do want to get in your face. I feel like there is a mismatch here for Oregon to have success when Penn State has the ball.
This Oregon defense, it's the whole storyline for Oregon this year is just fascinating how little we've talked about them, and certainly how little we've talked about their defense. They're one of 2 teams per PFF with a top 5 D-line grade and linebacker grade. Oh, and they also have a top 5 coverage grade. You mentioned the size in the secondary. It doesn't really matter, because Penn State doesn't have the guys to really threaten you on the outside. Tyler Warren is that guy. You've said this. I agree with you. I said this when I called their game. This is the most underrated defensive line, probably in college football, certainly in the Big Ten. We talk about Michigan's D-line. We just talked about Penn State's, Ohio State's. This D-line is nasty and ferocious. And then you just go back and you look at Penn State and you say, what happened when they met an elite defensive line? Okay, let's go to the Ohio State game. Drew Allar struggled, only 150 yards passing. They only had 120 yards rushing on the day. They were 3 of 11 on 3rd down. That's the 2nd straight year against Ohio State, really just as a principle, facing great defenses where they've struggled on 3rd down. They don't have the guys to separate and help out Drew Allar. So, again, it's the trenches. Can this offensive line hold up? I don't think they're going to dominate. I think Penn State, basically what I'm saying here, either Penn State wins a close one or Oregon wins and wins handily, and it will be completely decided by whether or not Penn State's offensive line can hold up against Oregon.
I mean, that's going to be the challenge, right? You look at Penn State's offensive line by the numbers. They have done a really good job in terms of sacks allowed, their fewest TFL yards allowed in the Big Ten. On paper, it looks like a unit that has played very well. But you and I flip on the game tape and we watch, and it's average pieces across the board. You would expect Penn State's offensive line to be further along than it is. And yes, to your point, like if you watch that Ohio State game, and this is an Ohio State defensive line that I think has really been solid, but not necessarily explosive. They kind of handled it. Like I think they dictated the tempo of that game against Penn State. The big X factor, though, and I think the point where everybody looks and says, well, if this guy has himself a day, then things can get sticky, is Tyler Warren. And I mentioned some of the size disparity between Oregon and their back end. That is a mismatch. And I'm curious to see, first off, how early they get him going and in what ways, because we've seen him obviously as a pass catcher. We've seen him as somebody who rushes the football. They have packages for him to throw it. He was a high school quarterback. They like running the shovel passes. They use him as an option there. Like there are many ways that they try to incorporate him. And I'm curious what the specific package for Oregon's defense would look like.
Yeah, listen, he's phenomenal. But again, I go back. Remember, we're all thinking the same thing. I believe we were texting in the Ohio State game. He was not involved. Like definitely not enough for a big game. We're like, why are they not getting? And then in the fourth quarter, he breaks that big time run down the sideline. He gets you into 1st and goal inside the 5, and he doesn't touch the ball again. Again, I say it's hard for me to trust when this is what I've come to expect. And on the flip side, what I like about Dan Lanning is this guy's he's psycho about it, man. The 12 man on the field versus Ohio State, that's impressive. That's chasing edges. And when you look at what Penn State does for for Tyler Warren, they line him up all over. It really is wonderful to watch how they use different formations, personnel, motions, shifts to get him into favorable matchups and situations. It's too much for most college coordinators to handle, to have a game plan. I fully expect Dan Lanning and Tosh Lupoi to have a great plan for Tyler Warren and have an ability to double team him and take him away as much as possible.
Yeah, that's what I'm kind of expecting too. Like I do think in terms of coaching staffs and preparation, it's hard for me to say that Oregon hasn't been the best in the conference outside of maybe Indiana at getting guys prepared with a plan that puts the pieces in the best spot. And the difference between Oregon and Indiana certainly is when it comes down to the Jimmies and the Joes, they have the advantage. And so when you pair that with the preparation, those guys, it can get to be a little bit crazy to watch just in terms of how impressed you are. I wanted to end it off here with this preview of asking for your pick in this football game. Jake, how do you see this one going?
Well, I do want to say one more X and O thing that does play a factor. Penn State has started slow all year, and I'm concerned about that. They have started slow. They started slow. They started slow against Bowling Green. They started slow against Kent State. They started slow against Maryland last week when I called it. It's been an issue for them. Again, to lead into my prediction, I think Oregon wins by more than a touchdown. Across the board, they are too much for Penn State. Again, it's just the same issue that Penn State's had, where they've been good. At times, they have been great. I do not believe they are a championship level team. The flip side for Oregon, they have been great. At times, they have been championship. And their coach is someone I have come to trust this year. So I see Oregon winning this one in a very comfortable fashion. Maybe even I'd take them double digits, 10 points plus.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm leaning on this one. I can't get over this vision I've been painting in my head of the offensive plan for Oregon attacking the secondary of this Penn State defense and really making those guys have to chase in some situations where I just don't think it's going to be favorable for them. And so when you pair that with this Oregon front that I think can overwhelm Penn State's offensive front, I think can minimize the run game. And for James Franklin, I do think the plan going into this one is to try to establish that run so you can let your defense get a little bit of rest. So you can let your defense make the adjustments on the sideline. I think Oregon can eliminate that for Penn State. If I had to call a score, I'm going 31-17. I don't necessarily think it's going to be a close one. And for Oregon, I don't think it really has to be. They have been the best team in college football. Basically, we watched that Ohio State game, and they have not looked back at all. They had the clunker against Wisconsin, and that was really it. They haven't had this variance that we've seen from so many other teams. They haven't lost a game in a way that makes us ask the question, what the hell happened? And when they played the one good team they had to play, they went out there and handled business. Penn State didn't. I think these teams are a little bit apart here, and I'm rolling with Oregon in this one.
I'm with you again. I think Penn State, the formula is like that D-line, Abdul Carter, they have got to dominate. I'm talking 4 or 5 sacks on the day. They got to win turnovers. And maybe one more thing is Dillon Gabriel. There's been a few instances in the red zone in particular where he makes a throw and he's thrown some interceptions and made some really bad decisions in the red zone. As long as he can avoid that, I think Oregon wins handily. I'll give you an actual score. I'll say 35-21.
All right. Oregon. Yeah, so we're kind of in the same neighborhood there. Of course, me and Jake could be completely wrong, and then we'll come back on here and we will eat our words. We always tell the truth about the choices that we made. And frankly, now that Jake has made a prediction, I think y'all should just fade him. It's been fade Jake season all year long here. No, it's a kiss of death.
Picking underdogs, though. I've actually
you're right.
Picking the favorites, so, yeah.
No, you're right. You're right. No, this will be. I think this will be a fun game regardless, because there's so much that we can learn, particularly for the Penn State side of things. But Oregon, I think this is like really the first step, though. And I talked about this on a different program. People ask the question, how hard is it to go undefeated in the regular season? And I was a part of 2 teams in back-to-back years that went undefeated in the regular season, won 24 straight games. The difficulty comes when you have the games where the hardware is on the line. The difficulty comes where you have the games where you're eliminated if you don't win. And this is where it starts for Oregon. All that 12-0 sounds real good. It sounds real good. You're not hanging a banner for just going 12-0. The work really starts for the Ducks on Saturday in Indianapolis.
Brand new season. It's a brand new season. So I'm completely with you. Excited to watch.
Yeah, no doubt. All right. Well, Jake, enjoy your time there in Indy. We'll be expecting a full report when we get back here. I'm going to be doing, like I said, a rankings reaction show on Sunday. So if anybody wants to migrate over there, Rushing the Field on NBC Sports YouTube is where you'd be able to watch that. That'll do it for us. That's Jake Buck. I'm Joshua Perry. This is Through the Whistle right here on CHSN, and we'll catch you soon. Yeah.